but generally someone needs to want to learn something new. They need to be very curious about something, or they need to be unrattled when they're asked to do something that's totally different. I'd say the two pieces of this that come to mind immediately are, one, being okay doing something that's imperfect the first time, and us making that okay. I think none of the values were be perfect, right? That's not something that we said. We say, be courageous, take action, even if it's not perfect. So I think making that okay and going through a couple reps where that's the case, and they know that it's okay. And then the second is just, being interested in knowledge attainment, being okay with transformation, seeing it as an opportunity as opposed to an annoying thing that you have to do. I think, someone who wanted to do the same thing every day probably wouldn't do very well at Incendium, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with those people. In fact, if anything, there's more things wrong with us, I think, for being crazy enough to try to do all this stuff. But having that at the center of it is pretty key.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to talk about skill building, specifically scaling your company through skill building. When you think about your employees, are you creating a place that they love to come to work and that they're growing to meet the demands of the market? Well, a lot of companies would say that they could do a better job with that. Hopefully you're honest with yourself, or at least self-aware that this is an area where you can improve. So scaling through skill development is today's conversation. We have the CEO of Incendium Strategies. They're a B2B growth studio. They really help people grow their mostly technology companies, not just any company, but it sounds like an agency, but he'll explain a little bit differently about what they do. The CEO there is Nate Houghton. Nate and I talk about skill building and scaling through skill building and why that's such an important aspect. They're in marketing, and I don't know what your experience is in marketing, but it changes faster than sales. It changes faster than technology. I know that sounds crazy, but like if you think about the core elements of technology, they do change. But marketing is changing every 6 months, sometimes every 3 months, and some things, what used to work doesn't work anymore. And so you're always looking for that next thing. And so he's created a group of employees who love to be there and they love to learn new things. They learn to grow. And one of the things he had told me before we cut the recorder on is every one of his employees is in a new role than they were 12 months ago. So think about that. Being able to move people around and learning the skills that they need to be proficient and provide value to their clients, that is very important. So hopefully this episode of scaling through skill building will resonate with you and really help you grow the kind of organization you want. My name is Gene Hammett. I'm an executive coach, do leadership development, not just at the CEO level, not just at the executive level, but we help managers become leaders too. When you have leadership at all levels, you can call this total leadership or whatever you want to call it, you will have the kind of leadership where it's a competitive advantage, where you are able to meet challenges, maybe change and pivot your company. So most of our clients have a new opportunity in front of them and they need to rise to the occasion. We help them do that. If you're curious about the work that we do, make sure you reach out to me directly, gene@genehammett.com. I'd love to help you through that. One of the things I'm really best at is the strategy elements of this and how that lines up with the people strategy and really figuring out what's getting in the way. And if you're curious about those things, it's absolutely free. All you have to do is reach out to me with an email and we'll find a time to talk about it. I will help you identify not only the blind spots, but also your plan to move forward. I've done this for more than a decade and I've done this for years and years before that, but I'd love to help you. And so if you're sitting on the fence and wondering if you should, go ahead and just send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. Let's chat about what's going on. I promise not to sell you anything, but if you do want our help, we'll have additional conversations where we'll go through that. And we just do that pretty systematically for our clients. And it helps us build the relationships and build trust, add value before you actually spend any money. So that's my intention behind this. Now let's go into this interview on scaling through skill development with Nate. Hey, Nate, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Gene. How are you?
I'm great. Excited to have you on the podcast here to talk about skill development as your company has scaled and grown. I know we're going to go in different areas. Before we go any further, tell us about your company, Incendium.
Yep. Happy to. Yeah, so we're a growth studio. We work with B2B companies, mostly technology companies and mostly early stage. We help them across various channels as they look to scale and grow, working with founders, growth leaders, and operators throughout the companies.
So it sounds like an agency, but I feel like there's something different here. What would you say is different about Incendium?
Yeah, I would probably a year or 2 years ago, I probably would have described us as an agency. That used to be the model that we operated with. We now call ourselves a community first. So we like to have different companies that add value to our community, various services within that community that they use as needed. The agency model we find, particularly for early stage companies, is pretty inflexible. I think kind of hard to manage if you're just getting something off the ground. And so we wanted to build something that was better, a little bit better suited for these companies that are just getting started with growth.
You've come here because you've made some incredible impact with growth. And we don't really want to talk about the services you offer. We want to talk about kind of the leadership and maybe in the culture that you've been able to create there. And our research says that you're a little bit differently. You think differently about the business overall. How would you frame in your leadership and culture that has made you guys successful?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And as far as the way the business is structured, the nature of early stage growth is that, the services and the channels and the things that work in marketing are changing really rapidly and honestly, probably more and more rapidly each year. So it doesn't make a lot of sense as an organization to get really good as a core competency at one thing that you know how to do. What we want to get really good at is having people who, one, like working where we are, and two, are constantly getting better and improving. And if we do that, then as the channels change, as the technology changes, as frankly AI comes into play with a lot of the work that we do, we're very well positioned to quickly get best. I think get good or get best at the things that are essential. And so in terms of how we structure the organization, it's people, then process, then technology. And I think for us, having really good people who understand the way that we work and can get things done across different channels is much more important than just being really good at, say, SEO or really good at a certain type of channel marketing.
I like this approach. It's different. I've worked with a lot of agencies. You probably don't know the detail behind this, but when I first started coaching was in 2012, and I was asked to pick a niche. And I will tell you, I picked marketing companies and agencies. Reason being was I had spent about $1 million in my previous business over the course of about 7 years. So healthy budget. And I could not tell you any ROI or impact it had with $1 million spent. And this is in a time when pay-per-click was a quarter every time you
Right.
get a click.
Absolutely.
Now it's what it can be $5, $10, $25 beyond. And so you have a different approach. And I want to single in on this. People who like working here, let's just talk about that first. Why is that such an important piece to your overall business strategy?
Yeah, I think well, there's a lot of directions to go with this. I think one is I want to be clear what I mean by that. That doesn't necessarily mean a ton of perks or it's easy or or it's super fun all the time. I think it's more an authenticity and an alignment with who they are and a sense of, what our values are and how they work. So we have core values of courage, action, simplicity, and honesty. It spells cash, so it's easy to remember. But courage, action, simplicity, honesty. And those guide decision making for everybody within the organization. One thing that I've noticed is that this is actually kind of a funny anecdote, but nearly everyone, seriously, about 80% or more of the team that has a significant other from a different country. And if they don't, everyone who doesn't lives in a different country than the one where they were born. And I think that it's kind of a funny coincidence, but if you think about what it means to sort of inherently be a courageous person, you're an explorer. You're very curious. You're able to go try new things, and you want to do that when you wake up in the morning. There's this kind of itch. I think that having a place where people really want to work for that type of a person means that it is a place where other people really wouldn't want to work. And so when I think about culture building or having a company, it's not supposed to be for everyone. It's not supposed to be a set of perks that anyone would appreciate. It's a way of doing things that I think is inherently in line with who somebody is. And those people tend to gravitate towards us, and we tend to attract them.
I love that you mixed in the values there.
Yeah.
How would you import into the values when you're hiring people to join you on this mission?
Yeah, I think some of them are easy to test, right? So simplicity, I think in interviews, you can understand if somebody can be a systems thinker and can break things down and how they explain things to you. Action is pretty quick too. We actually, one real indicator, if you ever want to work in Incendium, is send me a very quick thank you email after the interview, just to kind of get it done, just to take action. Courage, I think, actually takes a little while to reveal itself sometimes, but we're okay with people leaving if they're not a good fit, and I think that's okay. And generally we part on very good terms because there's nothing they did wrong. And then, honesty is obviously to some extent pretty non-negotiable. We are a remote company. We don't have an office, so we have people really all over the world at this point. And the way that we have to solve for honesty, I think, is by having really tight systems so that we know when something is off. So some of this gets into hiring, some of it gets into the systems that you build around it, but generally speaking, the values are supposed to be driving each one of those things first.
We've been talking about values. He shared his cash. I love the four and the acronym so that people understand what the values are. If you want to upgrade your values, I want to help you for free. Honestly, I've got a couple of frameworks and tools I've used with clients. I'd love to give them to you. I'd also love to have a conversation with you to see where you are. So if you're curious about these tools and really refreshing your values, or maybe defining them for the first time ever, and you have a leadership team that you can bounce this off of, I'll give you the process. I've got it written down, but I want to make sure there's a fit, and I want to fine tune it for you. So just send me an email, gene@genehammett.com, and just say values. And we'd love to talk to you about what that is. And if you mention it here on the podcast, I'm not going to charge you for it. I'm going to give it to you for free. That's my promise to you. Now let's dive back into the episode with Nate. I'm glad you bring it up. A lot of people don't know this if you're not around fast growth companies. And one of the things I've done is I've interviewed probably 800 CEOs like yourself, and the commonality of we live by our values. We hire, we develop, we fire, and all of the things in between are such an important piece to creating an organization, not just a performance, but if people like to work here. I want to dive into the other aspect of this, which is about developing skills. I know that, one of the things that my team pulled out of you was we scaled by developing the skills of others. You've already said this today. It's not about being an expert in SEO, but it's about being willing to learn what the next thing is and figuring out how we apply that to our current customers' needs. How do you look at skill building with a small staff that you have?
Yeah, well, I think it's certainly skill attainment, right? And we'll provide resources to the extent that we can for somebody to learn. But generally, someone needs to want to learn something new. They need to be very curious about something, or they need to be unrattled when they're asked to do something that's totally different. I'd say the two pieces of this that come to mind immediately are, one, being okay doing something that's imperfect the first time. And us making that okay. I think none of the values were be perfect, right? That's not something that we said. We say, be courageous, take action, even if it's not perfect. So I think making that okay and going through a couple reps where that's the case, and they know that it's okay. And then, yeah, the second is just, being interested in knowledge attainment, being okay with transformation, seeing it as an opportunity as opposed to an annoying thing that you have to do. I think, someone who wanted to do the same thing every day probably wouldn't do very well at Incendium, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with those people. In fact, if anything, there's more things wrong with us, I think, for being crazy enough to try to do all this stuff. But having that at the center of it is pretty key.
Let's dive into how you actually do this, because
Yep.
you can do internal trainings, you can do external trainings, it can be self-paced,
Yep.
it can be coaching, it can be all kinds of things. So walk me through how you look at skill building with your team.
Yeah, it's all backwards from the solution. So we follow some lean startup methodologies, right? I think we're not really the type of place that usually will say, we predict that in 6 months we're going to have to be good at this, so everybody take a course on this. We will sign a client or we'll bring somebody into the community, and they'll want us to do something, and we will sit down, kind of like that scene in Apollo 13, where they're like, all right, let's get all the things that they actually have up there, and we need to build a way for them to breathe, and like you just get the tools that you have.
Yeah.
And this results in it being, frankly, not all that well built at first, and that's fine. But if it gets the job done, then we can start to automate and build in from there. It also aligns things really nicely, because if you're like, hey, we need to get this thing, we need to build a marketing plan for someone on LinkedIn, whatever that might be, and then we need to execute on it. If somebody is overworked on my team, 9 times out of 10, they'll find a tool that makes them not overworked, and then we have a new tool. And I think that, if you kind of align things that way, and they know that that's the way that they're supposed to be measured. If we were counting hours, if they were clocking in and clocking out, if they were being measured by, activity as opposed to the success of the endeavor, it wouldn't work very well. But if we say this is a job that we have to do, let's just get it done once and then make it faster, the skill building, I think, tends to happen naturally as a result of that.
I've got to ask, because I know that one of the elements that employees want is a place where they can grow. And they want to grow not just skills, but they want to be more valuable to the marketplace after their time with their company or the role that they're in now. And you are doing that. You're investing in their future. You didn't tell me exactly how you're doing it. But I'm going to take this question first. Really it will attract the right people to you. And you guys see that as a reason for retention as you guys have scaled.
Yeah, I think so. If if it's that old adage of like, what is it? What if we don't, or what if we train our people and we leave, right? And then it's like, well, what if we don't and they stay, you know?
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think we've had very happy graduations, I would say, in some cases where people have gone on to do something different. They take the skills with them. We're really thrilled for them. It's awesome. It's great, and I think that we're able to kind of backfill that very successfully because there are other talented people. We've also had people stick around through several different cycles and iterations. I don't know if it's my age and my generation. I don't expect people to stay forever, and that's perfectly okay. If anybody wants to, they're more than welcome to. But there's also an element I should add too of like, I can't have an ego about being the best at anything in the organization. I don't really think there's much at Incendium that I am the best at anymore, that everybody knows how to do things that I don't. And I think if that was hard for me to stomach, people wouldn't get good at things, but we have people who are better at almost everything than what I do. In terms of how we actually do it, I do want to address that. I think for us, for better or for worse, this is much more around go buy the tool, see if you can learn how to use it. And our view of this, in this day and age with AI and software is that if it's hard for someone on my team to use, that is not their fault. They're very intelligent people who learn things all the time. That is the software's fault. And we probably should use something else that's better at it or figure out a way to do it on our own.
Nate just mentioned a quote about training. I'm going to give it to you the way I looked it up. Peter Drucker once said, when a critic asks, what if we train them and they leave? Well, winning organizations responds, what if we don't train them and they stay? Peter was so ahead of his time in this back then. You want to make sure that you are investing in your people, because if you don't invest in your people at the very minimum, they will not feel like they're growing, and they will start to get restless, and they will wonder what if somewhere else. I've been there. You've probably been there. You want to make sure you're providing at least some level of growth for every employee. Now, do you have to spend a lot of money? No. You just have to be intentional about this. We've done workshops for small organizations, bigger organizations, and it's a modest amount of money to invest if you're breaking it down per person. We've done coaching for people, so that's a bigger investment. But at the very least, you should take today's conversation as a signal that building and scaling through skill development is important to not just the person, but also the company as it meets new demands and things are changing quickly with AI. You should be investing quite a bit just in the world of AI, of people using tools, how we leverage this to get better, because there will be people out there that are doing it faster, better, because they're leveraging AI. Are you pushing it to the next? And that's just an example. Our focus, just so you know, not to make this a commercial, but we work in the leadership development side. A lot of managers are good at doers, but they really don't know how to manage work. They don't even know how to lead people. And we fill in the gaps for them to help them be the leaders that you need them to be, that you can hold accountable, empower them, and trust as the company scales. So if we can help you in any way, make sure you reach out to us. Back to Nate. And do you bring in outside people for training?
Typically, we don't for sales and marketing type work. So that's something that we like to develop our own techniques to do. We have before on more generalized training. So if it's something around career development, which might be outside the scope of their day-to-day work, which we want to invest in, yeah, absolutely, we've done that before.
I could see that. I would even recommend that for clients. We do leadership development, and if leadership development was your core business, you wouldn't outsource to me.
Right.
But since it's not for most of the people that I engage with, their business would be, in your case, marketing technology changes faster than anything out there. I've said this over and over and over. It's the hardest role for companies to hire. And that's one reason why you are in business, is because it's such a hard place to get impact. But you have a team of people that are figuring out ways to get impact as it changes quickly.
We also, the same thing applies where we have a pretty robust group of incredibly talented freelancers who just like to do work with us. And if it's something that we don't want to be a core competency, typically around like helping with marketing strategy or something like that, we are a preferred group for them to work with. And as long as they like to work with us, just like the people at the company like to work for us, we tend to have better access to talent for sure.
All right. So we've been talking about scaling by building up the skills of your team. Has it come back to bite you in some way that you're willing to share with us? But that, I don't know, you've gone down rabbit holes and you've invested in people and it didn't work out. And so you look back and go, okay, that didn't work. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I can't think of an instance where as concentrated for a particular person that's happened. I obviously, like anybody else, have made the wrong strategic decision about what we should invest in and what we should get good at. Although I think over time you tend to see those things as as essential to the next phase of growth
Yeah,
eventually,
yeah.
if you given enough time. So I think the instances where it's been wrong, it might be getting too good at the wrong thing. I think that as long as the team is comfortable, one thing I like to say is as long as they understand my thinking and they understand that I know that I can be wrong and that I'm changing direction quickly, it doesn't scare people too much, I think, to completely go back on something that was the plan 3 or 6 months ago, if you have good evidence behind it and your thinking is clear. So I don't know that it's been a case where we've invested really heavily in someone. It's much more we've invested in getting good at a particular skill set that then was obsolete, which I think happens to all kinds of businesses all the time.
It does happen.
Yeah.
I asked the question not to throw you a curveball, but a lot of people are playing in their head. What if I invest in them and they leave?
Mhm.
But what you're saying, and you're a smaller company, but that doesn't happen. We
It really hasn't. Yeah.
we have this. I want to switch gears a little bit here as we wrap up today.
Yeah.
The the leadership of this isn't as clear cut as the way most people lead. If you're trying to create a place where people want to be here, they're working remotely, their job may be changing every 12 months. It could be.
Yeah.
How do you wrestle with the leadership of that?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing that I've had to learn is I can't really make one size fits all type decisions. So I certainly have some things that I trust in my gut, and I have different decision making methodologies that I'll leverage. But I think more often than not, I'm treating each individual situation as its own individual situation, if that makes sense. And I'm really doing my best to not carry over, well, it worked for Jim, it's going to work for John or whatever it is. Like I think generally speaking, it needs to be a situation where I'm gathering the information about how to treat each individual on the merits of what that person, who that person actually is and what they're actually doing, and then just making the best call that I can. And I think that creates decision fatigue. I don't know for sure, but I wonder if a lot of leaders don't do that because making decisions is really what tires us out. And we have so many decisions to make already that 10xing the number of personnel decisions versus just trying to build process around it can be a little daunting. I have found that it helps. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that I think if you ask people, they would say that's evident that I'm actually there in that conversation and really trying to help them whenever I can.
I will tell you, it changes as your company scales. You were around
Yes.
13 employees. I know you got some freelancers, but if
Mhm.
you were 130 employees,
Right.
that gets harder.
And I don't think we'll ever be there for that reason. I don't think we want to be. I think that actually for us, like it would take away an essential element of who we are as an organization. Because I agree, I don't think you can keep doing that. And so for us, the scale is not going to be in the number of employees, and there are other ways to do that. But a big part of that decision making calculus is I couldn't agree more. I think it's that loses an essential element of what we like to do.
And that's a choice that we all make in this. I
Mhm.
don't plan on having 100 people in my company either, right?
Right.
We might scale to twice the size,
Mhm.
maybe even a little bit bigger. But I love the fact that, you have a place where people are put first.
Mhm.
That's what I'm hearing. You are developing those people through the skills, and you're being able to navigate the direction of the company to serve your clients quickly because of that. Is that
Right.
fair?
That's
Is there
exactly right.
anything that we've left out of this conversation that you feel like is pertinent?
I don't think so. I guess I was actually reflecting on anyone who did leave. We had one guy leave to go on tour with a rock band, so that was a loss. But I don't know what we could have done about that. We had someone else leave to work as in photography. So it's like I think that'll happen sometimes. But yeah, I think for the most part it's been pretty amicable. So yeah, for
Well,
sure.
well said. You can't compete with being a rock star or
He
chasing
was
your
nervous
passion.
about it. He was like, I didn't want to tell you. You got to do that. That's really cool. So hopefully we'll get
Yeah.
some out of it at some point. But yeah.
Well, Nate, I appreciate you being here talking about your journey of leadership, your scale of Incendium,
Mhm.
and really just your unique approaches to creating a place where people love to work,
Mhm.
building those skills, and why that is a big part of the success of the organization.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Wow, what a great interview. I love having different kinds of leaders on the show that think differently, that have different kinds of businesses. They're in different stages. And so today we have Nate talking about scaling through skill development and really looking at his leadership and why he wants people that love to come to work to at his place and love to learn to grow. And if you don't have that, hopefully you can learn something from today's episode and you can lean into this to make a better organization that's more fun to work at and adds more value to your clients that you're selling services to. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.